In the darkness of an ancient night, a single spark changed the fate of our species forever. For millions of years, fire was the anemia force of pure destruction that sent every living creature fleeing in terror. But then, somewhere between 1.5 million and 400,000 years ago, our ancestors did something no other animal had ever done. They stopped running. They turned to face the flames. And in that moment of unprecedented courage, they reached out and claimed fire as their own. This wasn't just survival. This was the second great technological revolution in human history, a transformation so profound that it would reshape our bodies, rewire our brains, and ultimately separate us from every other species on Earth. The conquest of fire didn't just change how we lived, it changed what we were. To understand the magnitude of this revolution, we must first travel back to a world where humans lived without fire's protection. Picture East Africa roughly 2 million years ago. Our ancestors, early members of the genus Homo, were vulnerable creatures in a landscape filled with predators. As darkness fell each night, they faced a terrifying reality that no modern human can truly comprehend. Lions, leopards, hyenas, and saber-toothed cats owned the night. Our ancestors, with their improving but still modest brains and their stone tools, had no defense against the darkness. They retreated to trees when possible, huddled together in caves, and lived in constant fear of what lurked beyond their sight. Their world ended when the sun went down. Their diet was limited and challenging. They scavenged meat when they could, using their stone tools to access the marrow inside bones that larger predators had abandoned. They foraged for roots, tubers, and plant materials that required extensive chewing. Their digestive systems worked constantly to extract nutrition from tough, raw foods. This required massive energy that came at the cost of other bodily functions, particularly the brain. But fire would change everything. The exact moment humans first controlled fire remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, and the debate continues to rage among researchers. The earliest controversial evidence comes from Wonderwerk cave in South Africa, where burned bones and plant ash have been dated to approximately 1 million years ago. Other sites like Gesher, Benot, Yaakov in Israel show compelling evidence of controlled fire around 790,000 years ago. But here's what we know with certainty. By 400,000 years ago, multiple sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia show undeniable evidence of humans regularly using fire. This wasn't accidental. These weren't forest fires that humans simply took advantage of. The pattern of ash deposits, the arrangement of burned materials, and the construction of hearths all point to something revolutionary: fire that was deliberately maintained, transported, and used. How did it begin? Imagine an early human, perhaps Homo erectus, witnessing a lightning strike or volcanic activity igniting dry grassland. While other animals fled, something in the human mind sparked a different reaction. Perhaps they noticed that fire drove game toward them. Perhaps they observed that charred meat from burned animals was easier to chew and digest. Whatever the initial observation, our ancestors made a cognitive leap that would define humanity. They saw not a threat to escape, but a tool to master. The journey from observing fire to controlling it likely took hundreds of thousands of years. First came the ability to keep wildfire alive, carrying embers wrapped in green leaves, feeding flames with dry wood, protecting the precious resource from rain and wind. Then, perhaps much later, came the ability to create fire on demand, through friction or striking stones. Each generation built on the knowledge of the last, developing an expertise that became fundamental to human culture. Once humans controlled fire, evolution itself began to reshape the human body in response. This transformation represents one of the most significant biological changes in our lineage, and it's centered on one crucial innovation: cooking. When food is cooked, its molecular structure breaks down. Proteins denature, making them easier to digest. Starches gelatinize, releasing energy that would otherwise pass through the body unused. Cooking is essentially external predigestion. It does outside the body what previously had to happen inside it. This seemingly simple process triggered a cascade of evolutionary changes. With cooked food, humans no longer needed massive digestive systems to process tough raw materials. Over generations, human guts became smaller. The large intestines, which had consumed enormous amounts of energy, could shrink because cooked food was absorbed more efficiently. This freed up a tremendous amount of metabolic energy that could be redirected elsewhere. Where did that energy go? To the brain. The human brain is an extraordinarily expensive organ, consuming roughly 20% of the body's total energy, despite representing only 2% of body weight. Before cooking, this level of brain development was simply unsustainable, alongside a large digestive system. But fire changed the equation. Some researchers, particularly biological anthropologist Richard Wrangham, argue that cooking was the key factor that allowed human brain size to explode from roughly 600 cubic centimeters in early Homo species to the 1,350 cubic centimeters of modern humans. The timeline supports this theory. Brain size began its dramatic increase around the same time that evidence for fire control appears in the archaeological record. Beyond digestion, fire reshaped human social biology. Cooked meat provided such dense nutrition that it could support larger social groups. Gathering around fires at night became a focal point for human communities. fostering longer periods of social interaction, storytelling, and the transmission of knowledge. The hearth became the center of human life, literally and figuratively. Fire gave humanity something that no other species possessed: control over time itself. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a species could extend the productive day beyond the constraints of sunlight. Around the fire, humans were safe. The flames kept predators at bay, as every animal retained its ancient instinct to flee from burning. This meant that for the first time, humans could sleep on the ground in relative safety rather than retreating to trees or cave heights. Sleep became deeper and more restorative, further supporting the energy-intensive brain development happening in parallel. But fire did more than protect sleep. It created a new phase of the day, the time after dark, when humans gathered around the flames. Anthropologists believe this time became crucial for human culture. Stories were told, knowledge was passed from elders to youth, social bonds were strengthened through shared meals and conversation. The flickering firelight became humanity's first theater, our first classroom, our first gathering place. Fire also dramatically expanded the geographical range available to humans. Before fire, humans were largely confined to warm climates where they could survive the night without protection from cold. But with fire, suddenly the temperate zones became habitable. Humans could venture into Europe during ice ages, survive winters, and thrive in environments that would have killed them before. The migration of Homo erectus out of Africa and across Asia likely would have been impossible without fire. As humans moved into colder regions, fire became not just beneficial but absolutely essential for survival. Archaeological sites in China and Europe from this period show extensive evidence of hearths and controlled burning, demonstrating that fire had become inseparable from human existence. The conquest of fire represents something unique in the story of evolution. While stone tools showed that humans could modify the world around them, fire demonstrated something more profound. Humans could harness and control fundamental forces of nature itself. No other species has achieved this. While some birds have been observed using fire to flush out prey, and while many animals learn to avoid it, only humans have made fire their servant. This mastery required unprecedented cognitive abilities, the capacity for long-term planning, the ability to maintain and transport a dangerous resource, and the foresight to gather fuel before it was needed. Fire became the foundation for every technology that would follow. Metalworking, ceramics, agriculture, and eventually the entire edifice of human civilization all traced their lineage back to that first controlled flame. Fire gave humans the ability to transform raw materials, to reshape the environment, and to survive in virtually any ecosystem on Earth. Today, billions of humans still gather around flames, whether it's a campfire, a fireplace, or even the glow of candles on a birthday cake. Something deep in our evolutionary memory responds to fire. We are drawn to it, comforted by it, mesmerized by dancing flames in a way that speaks to millions of years of human experience. The conquest of fire was more than a technological achievement. It was the moment when humans truly became human, when we transformed from clever primates with stone tools into a species capable of bending nature to our will. From that first spark, carefully guarded and tended by our ancestors, came everything that we are today. In the darkness of that ancient night, when one of our ancestors reached toward the flames, instead of fleeing, they lit a fire that would never go out. It burns still in every human heart, in every innovation, in every moment when we refuse to accept the world as it is and instead imagine what it could be. This is our inheritance. This is our story. This is how fire made us human.